Hello and welcome to the Devy to Dynasty Film Room podcast, episode 18. Continue on our Inside the Prospect series with my co-host, Matt Rupert. Matt, did you survive the other coast?
I did, and I got too used to the weather and came back to it being so cold I didn't know what to do. I see why
Yeah,
people live out there now.
flew all the way out
60
there, got
degrees
no
in the
sleep
middle of
one
winter is
day.
great.
For those that don't know, Matt Rupert went to San Francisco this past week. We live in the Carolinas, so took a nice little long business trip, but we're glad to have him back. And Matt Jackson is out tonight taking care of some stuff. So me and Mr. Rupert are going to continue our prospect series, diving into the all 22 on these 2024 rookies. And this week we are going to be taking our first look at the tight end position. So excited about that. We're going to be getting into two guys that have been bona fide studs in this class for a few years, pretty much the consensus 1-2 in the class. Guys that can provide hopefully a difference making option for you, especially in tight end premium leagues. And so, of course, that is Texas's Jatavian Sanders and Georgia's Brock Bowers. And so let's get into it. Rupert, before we get into the specifics of these prospects, is there anything you want to say just about scouting the tight end position in general, since this is our first time tackling the position?
Yeah, I'd say I look at it pretty similar to how I scout wide receivers, except for I'm going to put a lot more emphasis on how are they blocking in line or how are they kind of being used in run blocking or pass blocking game. That can kind of dictate how much they're going to be used at the NFL level, if they're going to be more, not being used on, jumbo packages or run plays, or even kind of limit them in the play action game. And then I'm also going to look more for like contested catchability. How are they in short area space with being able to use kind of quickness, being able to use their body to kind of block defenders out?
Yeah, so contested catches is a big deal for tight ends because most of the time they're not running wide open. They're not they don't have the body type to be really twitchy and create yards and yards of separation, running routes and that type of thing. And so there is a lot of box out situations, especially in the red zone. Um, Yards after catch is big because a lot of times tight ends tend to catch lower A dot type of stuff closer to the line of scrimmage. And their big playability often comes from being able to run after the catch. And the blocking one is interesting because the NFL really, really needs tight ends to be able to block. That's a huge part of the job description. But for fantasy, we kind of don't want them to be asked to block all the time. Like we want them to be primarily used as receiving tight ends for fantasy purposes. And so, I mean, even a guy like Kittle is one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. But if you look at percentage snaps that he's asked to block compared to a guy like Travis Kelce, who is almost never asked to block, and it actually does limit Kittle's fantasy upside quite a bit. So the blocking can be kind of a double-edged sword. It can keep you on the field. It can help you make a roster. It can help you get the great draft capital. But if you're too good at it, it almost can limit your fantasy upside. So tight end, more than any other position, I feel like has maybe not more than any position because quarterback is pretty important. But being in the right scheme, we're going to be used the right way. And yeah, asked to do the things that lead to fantasy points and not the things that just lead to winning for your real life football team. So all of that is things to keep in mind with the tight end position, but largely a lot of the same traits that we're looking for out of wide receivers is what we're looking for out of tight ends because we want a really good receiving tight end. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's save our desserts for last. We'll hold off on our guy Brock Bowers for now. And we'll start with the meat and potatoes. Let's go with Jatavian Sanders from Texas. He is a 6'4", 243-pound junior, early declare. He was a 5-star prospect, was the number 1 athlete in his class. So he was, just if you don't know, when guys are coming into college, sometimes instead of being given a positional designation, they'll just be labeled athlete. And it's kind of like unsure what position their college team will end up asking them to play. So he was an athlete and ended up playing tight end. So, Yeah, didn't play much as a freshman, really at all as a freshman, but he burst onto the scene as a sophomore. He had in back-to-back seasons over 600 yards, and in one season he had 5 touchdown catches, the other 2. And so all those numbers are relatively respectable for a tight end. They don't, we're not looking for like 1,500 yard seasons out of tight ends. 700 yards is pretty darn good. So, yeah, pretty respectable production profile the last 2 years as a big part of Texas's passing attack. And let's get into the film. Let's get into the traits. So, similar to what we talk about with wide receivers, we'll just start with the route running, and looking for a lot of the same things: release against press coverage, ability to manipulate defenders and get open at the stem of the route, settling in against zone, all the stuff we look for with wide receivers in terms of route running. Relatively similar with tight ends. So, what did you notice for Jatavian Sanders as a route runner?
I thought he was really good in this area. It was funny. The first thing I thought of was like they lined him out wide quite a bit because he is such a good athlete. And I was just like, man, I like his release a lot better than some of the wide receivers I scouted this year so far. I thought his acceleration just pops off the film. He's so quick to accelerate, get up to really high top speed for a guy that size is really quite alarming. I don't think he's as of depth with, having like a swim move or, certain like kind of stab steps and getting inside real quick. I think that's like kind of the stuff that's going to take his game to the next level. But I thought he was really above average with his route running, being able to get off the line. I didn't see him, I guess, have as much like a awareness to kind of set up defenders and kind of like make them miss. In the Alabama game, it seemed like he was the focus of their defense. Like they would just try and jam him. Really, they got away with a ton of holding. He'd be 5-10 yards down the field, and they'd just be like running and like grabbing him. But he didn't really show like a real good ability to kind of make them completely miss. The plus side was he was able to break free of them a lot of times and use his acceleration to get wide open on corner routes and fly routes and crossing routes. But I think they're going to take his game to the next level. Is getting a little bit more weapons in his arsenal with his release off the line, and then just having a little better awareness or like better ability to kind of set up defenders at the stem of his route.
Yeah, I had some of the same observations. I think the thing about tight ends, they're not usually asked to run a super complicated route tree in comparison to wide receivers. So you don't need them to be able to run every route in the playbook. There's a couple of bread and butter tight end routes that they get asked for the most part to run over and over and over again. You got your vertical route up the seam, you got your little stick route to catch it short, run after the catch. A lot of tight ends are used on these kind of like tight end screens where they're put in the play action and they pretend like they're blocking and then they just slip out. And I guess tight ends run a decent amount of dig routes too. But not like he doesn't need to have a super complex route tree. And the other thing about tight ends is they often are matched up against linebackers and safeties. They're not matched up against cornerbacks. And so they can either win with size against safeties or they can win with speed against linebackers. And that's what he is. He's a size speed mismatch. The nuance is not really there yet in terms of footwork and defensive manipulation. That, as far as what I could tell, I didn't see a ton of like getting open with technique. I saw a lot of getting open with physicality, and he was able to do that. He was open a decent amount. Definitely not as refined in terms of his like route running technique as the next guy that we're going to talk about, but not terrible either. So yeah, route running pretty solid overall for Jatavian Sanders, I would say. Let's get into ball skills. You mentioned that ball skills, whereas maybe with a wide receiver, I would say like route running is my number one thing that I need them to have, and ball skills is number two. I might flip-flop that with the tight end.
100%.
And so, yeah, so let's get into ball skills. What did you notice with Jatavian Sanders?
I didn't chart any drops with him. He caught everything that was thrown his way in the games that I watched. I saw him really just he was a complete hand scratcher. I didn't see, one time where, his body catching it. There's defender draped all over him on a post route, and he's plucked his hands out there. The defender even grabbed his arm, and he still came down with it. I came away really impressed with his ball skills, and it just seems like something that's going to translate perfectly to the next level.
Yeah, we saw the same thing, and actually, so we watched different games, and the ones that I watched, I saw a couple of like spectacular catches where it's not like, okay, he just didn't drop it, but no, actually, he made really, really tough. I saw two different one-handed catches where really tight window, defender draped all over him, like you said, and he just stuck one arm out and just plucked it, made it look so easy, so effortless, like
Yeah,
sticky hands, big catch radius, 6'4". I mean, obviously, like you would expect
long
out of
arms,
a tight end, long arms, can jump. So yeah, this was a real strength for him. And if there was one area where I was going to say I actually think he's better than Brock Bowers in an area, it would be this right here. It'd be ball skills. So yeah. So anyway, great ball skills, solid route running. We're off to a good start here. Let's talk about yards after the catch. That's an important trait for the tight end. Like I mentioned, they catch a lot of little slip out screens and stick routes and just short, low A dot stuff. And you have to be able to run after the catch. It's a big part of being um, productive at the tight end position from a fantasy perspective. So, what did you notice out of him as a yak guy?
I think again, this is another really huge strength of his due to his incredible athleticism, and I think he is like really physical and aggressive. The note I made was like he was like really feisty with his yards after catch, fighting through like three guys, not just going down. Um, he was used a ton on wide receiver screens and kind of like slip out routes in the games that I watched, and every time he's picking up 8+ yards. I think that's really where he's going to shine, like in his first year or two in the NFL, as he like works on a little bit more nuance with the route running and release and everything. I think this is one of his. I think his hands were his best attribute. I thought this was his second best.
Okay. Yeah, what I saw from him in this area was kind of like a runaway freight train. Like if he caught it and he had room to run, he could get up to speed fast and would be hard to bring down. But really, I just saw like a straight line north south runner, like not any wiggle. Which again, I mean, 250 pounds, it's kind of understandable. But whereas I saw Brock Bowers, who we'll talk about in a minute, so I'm kind of giving a spoiler here. But I saw him like making cuts, breaking guys' ankles. I didn't really see that from Sanders. So he's athletic and that helps him after the catch, but it's more of like if the blocking's set up for him, if there's room to run, kind of yak rather than creating a bunch on his own type of yak, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So
I think that's just one of the things that just makes Bowers a generational guy.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I agree. Like he didn't have like a ton of wiggle, but my note was like I just kind of
yeah.
expect that from
But
tight ends.
I would say even for a tight end though, like I mean, when I think of like a Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, some of those guys, they're big, but they're kind of nimble on their feet. I didn't really feel like Jatavian Sanders was nimble on his feet. I felt like and this was in his route running and his yards after the catch. I felt like he was a little bit stiff hipped. Kind of, he's big and he can run really fast in a straight line, but just not a lot of lateral quickness at all to him. And so I do think that that's a physical limitation that is going to affect him both after the catch and as a route runner. He's just not, some guys, even at a big size, they've just got natural fluid hips, and that just doesn't
Mhm.
seem like it's who JT Sanders is as a player. So I think that's worth noting.
Yeah,
So last thing we'll get into here, and you kind of mentioned it early on, is blocking is huge for the tight end, and it can be that double-edged sword where it's like I want you to be good enough as a blocker, but I don't want you to be too good. What did you notice about Jatavian Sanders as a blocker, whether it be, I mean, obviously tight ends are asked to block way more than wide receivers are. So, with both of these guys, we got to see them in pass protection. We got to see them lead blocking on run plays. We got to see them trying to hold off defensive ends in pass pro. So what did you see here with Sanders?
I thought he was probably like a little bit better than Bowers in this area.
Really?
What I noticed was it might have just been like the game script, like where they're running a ball a ton towards the end of the game, but they used him a ton, like kind of on those sweep motions where they would bring him across the formation and he, kind of block the edge and kind of open up some nice lanes for the running back. I thought he was really good when the defenders are kind of right there. Where I saw him struggle was like on blitzing, linebackers or corners where they kind of like are running full steam at him already. He really struggled to kind of figure out what was going on, and he would whiff on those instances. But when he was just blocking a defensive end right in front of him or a linebacker that's, kind of trying to read like where the running back's going, once he got his hands on him, he has really long arms, so he's locking them up between the shoulder pads and just holding them out there at length, and they're not really able to do anything. I saw that over and over again where he just would lock them up and it was kind of game over. So I think that's going to be a strength for him at the next level.
Yeah, he was better than I expected, honestly. Like, I mean, I know that in college he was primarily used as a receiving tight end. I knew that he was a freak athlete, and so I kind of came in expecting to see a guy who struggled with blocking, just based on like the reputation. But I thought he was pretty good, like
Yeah.
very willing, very engaged as a blocker, plenty of strength to like drive guys back. And yeah, overall, like most of the notes that I wrote about him as a blocker were very positive. I don't think this is something that would keep him off the field at the NFL level by any stretch. So yeah, overall, I think we both really like Jatavian Sanders as a prospect. I was pleasantly surprised. Like I didn't know what to expect. Like all I've heard about him is freak athlete, freak athlete, freak athlete. And so I was kind of like, is he actually a good player? Or is he just a freak athlete? And I thought he was, after watching the tape, I think he's a good football player.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be a good football player at the next level. Most of the projections I'm seeing right now, he's either a first round or early second round draft pick for the NFL, which is a really good sign. You get that kind of draft capital, you're going to get some opportunity. We like the tape. We like him as a prospect. We just need him to land in a system that we like because that matters a ton for tight end. They need to be used the right way. And obviously you always have to be patient with tight end at the NFL level anyway. Not everybody's going to come in and do what Sam Laporta did this year. But overall, I'm pretty high on him. I think right now he's getting overlooked in this draft class. We did a mock draft the other day with the Dynasty Lounge, and I can't remember. I want to say he went in the third or fourth round, which that obviously would not happen if it's a tight end premium league and he gets drafted that early in the NFL draft. So, yeah, there's a gap between Bowers and him, but it's not as big as I was thinking that it was.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to be a guy that if I can get him in the early to mid second of a rookie draft in a tight end premium league, I'm going to be really, really excited about that.
Yeah. I will be targeting him there all day if that's where he ends up going.
Yeah. So let's move on. Let's talk about the guy, the man, the myth, the legend, Brock Bowers. He is 6'4", 240 pounds is what he's listed at. Junior, early declare. He was a 4-star prospect and the number 2 tight end in his class as a prospect. But man, he has been an immediate difference maker from the moment he stepped on the field, on the college football field, from true freshman year. I mean, this is a guy that came out his freshman season and he put up over 700 yards as a true freshman. He has done nothing but dominate ever since. It's not like he's slowed down. I mean, Brock Bowers, he put up 700 yards, 714 yards, 6 touchdowns on 56 catches as a true freshman. Followed that up his sophomore year with 63 catches, 942 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then he came in this year and he actually missed a couple of games due to injury. He still put up 56 catches, 882 yards, and 13 touchdowns. So even though it's a lower yardage total than his sophomore season, when you look at it on a per game basis, he was even better, just continued to take his game to a new level. So like if he didn't miss games this year, you're looking at a guy 1,000 yards, probably 16 to 18 touchdowns is what he was on pace for. So just an absolute monster his entire time in college. So yeah, let's get into him as a player. He's a Devy player we've been waiting on for a long time. He's been touted as like the best tight end prospect we've ever seen. Rupert, when you watched him, did he live up to the hype for you? Just knowing like how much he was built up in your mind and having never watched him, because you're not a Devy guy. So like this was you looking at him for the first time saying, is he as good as advertised? What did you think?
He was even better than I expected, to be honest. Like it was very, reminiscent of Marvin Harrison Jr., but I feel like I'd seen more highlights from Marvin Harrison than just, kind of knowing who his dad is. Like the expectations were quite high there, but I was really blown away with Brock Bowers, and I can't wait to get a share or two of him. I got a couple of weeks where I'm in pretty good position to draft him, and I can't wait to rush to the podium with those picks.
All right, well let's talk about what makes him as great as he is. So let's start with the route running. What did you notice about him as a route runner?
He's incredibly athletic, just like JT, but he is so good right off the line with swim moves, stutter steps, stab steps. He gets open immediately. Like his swim move looks like he's been in the pros for 8 years already. The way he's like just able to beat off anyone. He's going to be such a weapon in the red zone. Going to be almost impossible to stop. He is so good at the stem of his route with being able to kind of like set guys up. This is where he really excelled. To me, he's able to manipulate the defenders and kind of get them to a spot where he wants them so that he can go the other way, beat them inside, beat them outside, whatever it may be.
Yeah, so he had, I had a lot of the same observations. Really nuanced technique, really great footwork. Tell he's been well coached. He's worked hard at his craft, very polished. And a lot of times when you get a white guy and you go, oh, he's polished, he's nuanced, it's like that implies it's like, oh, he's not athletic. He's just winning with technique. I think he's just as fast, if not faster, than Jatavian Sanders. I think he's more fluid with his hips, got more wiggle, much more fluid in and out of his breaks as a route runner at the stem of his route.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, this is a guy that you could legitimately label as like an always open type of guy. And he can run route. He's one of those few tight ends that really can run route. Like people throw this out there, the phrase like, oh, he runs routes like a wide receiver. Very few guys at the tight end position, because they have to be like 250 pounds to be able to do what they're asked to do in the blocking and other phases of the game. Very few guys can go out there at 240, 250 pounds and actually run routes like a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Brock Bowers can. He is special in that regard. And I think it is because his hips are so fluid, but also because he is so polished. So yeah, love what I saw out of Brock Bowers as a route runner.
I think that's the biggest strength. He's really unlike any other tight end prospect I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I will say this too about him as a route runner. He's versatile. So sometimes when you think, oh, he runs routes like a wide receiver, well, that just means they never put him inside. They never ask him to block. They just they go full Jimmy Graham on the thing and they just line him out wide and he might as well be a big wide receiver. That's not the case with Brock Bowers. So traditional tight end routes from the inline position where he's running a stick or he's running up the seam against a zone, matched up against a linebacker. Um, these little slip out routes where he fakes like he's about to block and then slips out into the second level.
Yeah.
He did all of those masterfully. Within the first like minute and a half of watching his tape, I saw him line up in line. I saw him line up out wide. I saw him line up in the slot. I saw him line up as a running back in the backfield. I saw him take a direct snap. I mean, kudos to Georgia for being creative in their usage of him and finding ways to get the ball in his hands, but also major kudos to Brock Bowers for being that Swiss Army knife, for having both the physical skills and the technical skills to make plays at all of those different positions on the field. And whatever NFL offensive coordinator gets their hands on this guy, I mean, what an ultimate weapon, right? Like, I mean, he looks athletic enough that he could play running back in the league, which is crazy because he's 6'4", 240. He looks like he's a good enough route runner that he could play wide receiver in the league, which is crazy. And then, like, when he's actually lined up in line as a tight end and he's getting matched up against a linebacker, like, that's just unfair. I mean, he
Yeah.
was dusting these linebackers on routes down the field when they left him one-on-one against the linebacker. And he even had so much speed that he was threatening safeties. Like, I saw safeties on their heels trying to run with this guy. So,
I was going to say, I saw him, running, like getting free from cornerbacks from like slot fades, and he's just running away from them down the field. Like they couldn't even keep up with him. It's just
yeah.
incredible. I think going back to what you said about him lining up, in 8 different positions, I think that's really just goes to show his football IQ and
Mhm.
overall awareness. I think it's a real big plus for him.
Yeah, so I mean, we're waxing eloquent about this guy. It's fun tape to watch. Um, let's talk about this next area of ball skills because this one was interesting for me. I am a Devy guy. I've watched a lot of college football. I've watched a lot of Brock Bowers games live, so I know he has good ball skills. This is one of the dangers of a small sample size. We each watched 2 games, so between the 2 of us, we watched 4 games, which is a pretty decent sample. But just in my 2 games that I watched, I didn't see any contested catches. I actually saw 1 bad drop, which is really uncharacteristic of Brock Bowers. And so, we talked about how important it is to be able to box out and go up and make these contested catches. I didn't really see that in my 2 games that I studied as we prepared for this podcast. What did you notice in this area, Rupert?
I didn't have any like spectacular kind of catches in the games that I watched. I know he has that in his bag from seeing highlights over the last couple of years. What I did see a lot is his quarterback trying to get him killed and throwing him right into a safety. There's, I think, like 4 plays where he just absolutely got crushed, but he held on to the ball and he, was really fearless in those situations and didn't drop any of the balls. So I gave his hands a A+.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that this is an issue or an area to worry about it. Like I knew when I was watching, it's like, okay, this is just a small sample size. Like I've seen enough Brock Bowers live over the last 3 years to not overreact to this. The one drop that I saw, it was pretty bad. Like, I mean, he ran a route, got wide open in the end zone. Quarterback hit it, perfect ball placement. He had the DB pinned on his back shoulder and just dropped the pass. It would have been a touchdown. But that's pretty uncharacteristic for Brock Bowers. This is why I said that maybe if there was an area that Jatavian Sanders was better than Bowers, it would be this one. Just because I saw some really spectacular catches from Jatavian Sanders. But yeah, this isn't like a deal breaker or anything like that for me. And I want to watch more film than the 2 games that I did watch, and I will between now and April. And if I come away from watching more film and I feel like, wow, I'm still not seeing it, then it might be a cause for concern for me, just because that is so important at the tight end position. But at this point, it's not something that I'm overly worried about. So let's move on. Let's talk yards after catch. And I feel like this is, I mean, I kind of hinted at this earlier when we were talking about Sanders, and I said, Bowers can juke and do some things that Sanders can't. But what did you notice from Bowers in terms of his run after the catch ability?
It's exact same. He shouldn't be able to cut like that at almost 250 pounds. It's really phenomenal. It looks like Travis Kelce out there. Um, he's able to put his foot in the ground, change direction with ease. Like you said, it seems like he has really fluid hips where he can kind of sink down and change direction. Um, he's very fast, really good acceleration. So he seems like he's going to be an absolute weapon with the yak ability at the next level.
Yeah, I think, and this is hard to say because the route running is so good. You can make an argument that yak is his best trait, because he is really fantastic. And they did a lot to get the ball in his hands, short, close to the line of scrimmage. They just wanted to get the ball in his hands any way that they could. So I saw a ton of little like tight end screens and fake the block on the play action and then slip out, like a ton where he caught the ball at or behind the line of scrimmage. And he almost always got at least 10 yards out of it. He had great vision to follow his blocks well, great cutting ability. He was patient when he needed to be patient and let a block develop. I even saw they gave it to him on a jet sweep end around, which you never see tight ends doing jet sweeps. Like what the what the heck am I watching here? And he killed it. Like it was a great play. So tackle breaking ability because he's strong. I mean, like you think if you're throwing a wide receiver screen and it's a cornerback trying to come up and make the tackle, but now instead of a wide receiver that he's trying to tackle, it's a 6'4", 240-pound tight end, and this cornerback's trying to bring him down. Like there's some problems with that scenario for the defense.
Good luck.
Yeah, so just incredible in this area, honestly. So
Yeah, it's
overall,
because
we're
you got to
starting to see
worry
what
about his
makes
wiggle. You got to
his
worry about
wiggle.
his wiggle, and he can run through you. So you got
Yep.
to deal with both.
Yeah. So you're starting to get a picture, if you're listening, of like what makes Brock Bowers such a great prospect. Because like last year at this time we got to Michael Mayer, and Michael Mayer had great college production and had for a long time been considered the tight end one of his class. But when we actually got to studying the tape, we were like, well, he's a little slow, he's a little this, he's a little, and that's not the case with Brock Bowers. Like this is not a case where we're just box score scouting and we look and, oh, he was really good in college, so he's our top prospect. No, like we're watching the tape and we're seeing clear traits and ways that he is going to win at the next level and he's going to score you fantasy points. So let's talk real quick about the blocking. I know earlier you said that you thought Jatavian Sanders was better than Brock Bowers as a blocker. And I was kind of surprised because I didn't, that's not the conclusion that I came to. But yeah, let me know. What did you see about Bowers as a blocker?
Again, it could have just been game script in the games that I watched, but he just wasn't used a ton in the blocking. And when he was typically getting help. So that's why I made that observation. He was normally, chipping with a left tackle or kind of like sealing the edge with the tackle typically. Whereas, I saw Sanders a lot more one-on-one and locking guys up. But yeah, a lot of the games I was watching, he was just not used anywhere near as much. So it's not a weakness of his, but from the games I saw, it just wasn't something that I was like, man, he's really good in this area because they didn't use him a ton and he normally had help.
Yeah. So one of the knocks that I have heard on Bowers, probably the only knock that I've heard on Bowers consistently, as he's been a Devy name over the last couple of years, is he's undersized for a tight end. Because he's not this like 6'7", 260 like mountain of a man, but he's plenty big and he's strong, like really strong. I noticed a number of plays, and this was part of what made him so versatile is they could fake it to him like they were going to throw a tight end screen and then actually throw the wide receiver screen and he would get down the field and block and pancake dudes, or they could fake the wide receiver screen and then he would pretend like he was going to block and then he would leak out into the second level and get wide open. they were really, I mean, Georgia did a great job using him. There were some really, really clever play designs to get him open and get the ball in his hands. But I mean, Bowers was really good blocking out on the edge, for, whether it be for a screen or a run blocking play. And then I also saw plays where he held up one-on-one against the defensive end for like multiple seconds in pass protection. So overall, I was more impressed with him as a blocker than I expected to be, given his reputation of being quote unquote undersized. And they lined him up in line a lot, which was good because I mean, you want a guy that can do both things, right? Like you don't want a tight end that's just going to be outside running routes, because a lot of tight end production comes from those little sneaky, like pretend you're blocking and then sneak out or catch a stick route, especially in a PPR league. Like, okay, run 3 yards forward, stop, turn around, catch a pass. That's free
Yep.
points, right?
Yeah.
Like you want your tight end to be used that way. All the screens and just the ways that they were getting the ball in his hands, but a lot of it came from the inline position, and a lot of it came from lined up out wide. But you can't do the inline stuff if you can't block. I thought he was a really, really good blocker. I thought this was what contributed to his versatility. And yeah, I mean, overall, I don't see a lot of flaws in Bauer's game at all.
Yeah.
I'm really, really enthralled with him as a prospect. It's hard to imagine a world where he is not incredibly productive for fantasy. We already know he's going to be a high first round pick. Um, a lot of mock drafts have him going to the Chargers. If that ends up being the case, like, oh my goodness,
To the
um,
moon.
to the moon, right? Like that's kind of LA's sneaky way of like fixing their mistake from last year with Quentin Johnston, but without actually admitting that they made a mistake. Because if you come back and you have the number 5 pick and you spend it on another wide receiver, then you're just admitting that you busted on Quentin Johnston last year, right? But if you
Yeah.
come in with the number 5 pick and you take a tight end, yeah, but he's still your number 1 pass catching option when Keenan Allen moves on,
Yeah.
right? Like I think that that setup would be phenomenal for him. But really, Brock Bowers has future Hall of Famer written all over him. He's an incredible player. He's it's not an exaggeration to say he is the best tight end prospect we've ever seen. And it's hard to
Not
imagine a
even
world
close for me.
where he doesn't hit.
Yep.
So
100%
yeah,
agree.
we love Brock Bowers. We're excited to take Brock Bowers. How high would you take him in a super flex tight end premium league? Right? Because the top of this draft class is loaded. I mean, you got Caleb Williams and Drake May, who are both projected to be top 5 draft picks, really great quarterback prospects. You got Jaden Daniels, who's probably a top 10 NFL draft pick, massive rushing upside. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best wide receiver prospect we've seen maybe since Megatron. A lot of people think Malik Neighbors is almost as good as Marvin Harrison Jr. and
I've seen some
would
people
be the
put him
number 1
above
wide
Marvin
receiver.
Harrison.
Yeah, I've
Granted,
seen some people put
Twitter
him above
world,
Marvin Harrison. I don't agree with it. But so like where do you slot it? And then people love Odunze too. Where do you slot Bowers into all this if it's a tight end premium super flex league? How high would you take him?
I'd take him too. If it's like a 2 point tight end premium league, I could see taking him over Marvin Harrison after, which I did not expect to think until I went into the tape.
Really?
I think like
I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could take him over Marvin Harrison Jr. And if it's a super flex, I mean, we haven't gotten to studying quarterbacks on this show yet, and so we still have to take our deep dive into the all 22 on guys like Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. If it's a super flex, I have a hard time taking Bowers over May or Williams. And I love Daniels a lot. See, like it's so hard. It's so hard.
yeah,
But I could
I'm
see the
I'm
argument
saying this
for it.
based on like roster construction. So
Mhm.
like I could see taking him at 2. Realistically, it'd probably be like 4 or 5.
Yeah. So assuming one and a half is kind of the standard if you're in a tight end premium league. So let's assume 1.5 point tight end premium. I think for me, it's a very clear at this point, May, Caleb Williams, not in that order, but those 2 guys, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
And then with, I mean, depending on Jaden Daniels, like 4 is as high as I think I could go. Like I don't think I'm taking him over those 2 quarterbacks in super flex. I don't think I'm taking him over Marvin Harrison Jr. So then it becomes between him and Neighbors and Daniels, who are all really good prospects, and that's where I might play it based on team need. So 4 is probably the highest I could see myself taking him at this point, with studying still to do. So, but we love Brock Bowers. We love Jatavian Sanders, not as much as Brock Bowers, but we like him a lot. And that's your breakdown. All the traits, strengths, weaknesses, what we saw on tape. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I will say real quick, we get all of our film from the Dynasty Nerds film room. So dynastynerds.com. You can use promo code COOP. It's real cheap. The link will be in the description. It's like the price of a cup of coffee every month, and you get 15% off if you use our code, and it helps us out a lot. So that's where we do all of our study. There's like multiple games of all 22 for all the major prospects in this class. So definitely go check that out. You can also find me on Twitter at Devy2DynastyFR, which is also the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/@Devy2DynastyFR. It's the number 2, not TO. And yeah, that's where you can find me. Where can they find you, Matt Rupert?
You can find me at Matthew Rupert FF on Twitter.
There we go. So thanks for watching. We really appreciate you guys. Leave us a 5-star review. Drop a comment, a like, a sub if you're on YouTube. Appreciate you guys a lot, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.